Hi there, and welcome to Dark Souls Remastered, the tutorial. My name is Niltsiar, and since I first bought this game back in 2011, I have spent hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours playing the game repeatedly and loving every minute of it. When I first started playing the game, I did find some aspects of it particularly challenging. Some of the bosses are very difficult, and I died to them many times. And sometimes I got frustrated at the game because certain mechanics can be rather obtuse and certain areas can be very demanding. However, with enough perseverance, I managed to stick with the game and complete it, but it was very, very difficult. Since then, the game now seems a lot easier. I have learnt more about the game, and I have learnt some tips and tricks in order to get through some of the more difficult and challenging areas. What I would like to do throughout this run is share those tips and tricks with you, so that you too, if you're struggling with the game, can progress from the start all the way to the end. I won't be beating all of the bosses in this run, and I won't be going to all of the different areas. Some areas in Dark Souls are optional. So instead what I will do is focus on the critical areas, those that you need to go to progress the game, and only fight the bosses that you need to beat in order to get from the start of the game to the end. Before I begin, I would like to talk about the Dark Souls online and offline system. In Dark Souls, you can choose to play online, which allows you to summon other players into your game world that can then help you to defeat a boss. They could also then summon you into their world, and you could help them to beat their boss. However, this comes at a risk. In order to summon another player into your world, you must become human. And when you become human, you can then be invaded by other players that may then choose to invade you and try to kill you. As a first-time player, this can be very frustrating. So I would advise that if you haven't played the game before, to switch to offline for your first playthrough, and then switch back to online when you feel more comfortable with the game and the game mechanics. I will take my own advice, and I will play offline for this playthrough. However, I may do tutorials in future on some of the online aspects of the game. To begin, we will create our character. The gender of the character makes no difference, it's a free choice. However, the class that you choose can have a big impact right from the start of the game. In Dark Souls, you are not locked out of any abilities, of any spells or any aspects of the game based on the class that you pick. However, the class that you choose at the start can help you to get those abilities much quicker. I would advise for a first time player to either choose the warrior or the knight. These are very sturdy, very simple to play, very basic characters, focusing entirely on melee combat. You could also choose to play as the wanderer, the thief, the bandit or the hunter. These are more focused on dexterity builds rather than strength builds, which is something that we can discuss later on. They're also sensible choices. However, I would avoid the sorcerer, the pyromancer and the cleric if you're a first time player. These three are focused on casting spells, casting pyromancies or casting miracles, which is not something I'll be touching upon in this video. The Deprived is something of a challenge class. He starts with no armour, just a weapon and a shield. It can be more challenging to start as the Deprived, but certainly enjoyable to do so if you wanted to make a second character and really test yourself once you've completed the game. For this video, I'll be starting as the warrior, and I will explain more about the decision later on in the video. The gift has a very minimal impact on the game. The only item that makes a big difference would be the master key. This unlocks a lot of different locks in the game and can give you access to some of the later areas of the game much earlier on. Those later areas tend to be quite challenging, however, so I would avoid the master key if you're a first time player and just play through the game in the intended order. The Goddess's Blessing is a decent choice, as it would give you a nice extra heal that you can use early on in case you run into some difficulties. Physique makes no difference. Neither does face, hair, or colour. You can make these as free choices, as they only affect the cosmetic look of the game. And there we have it. Let's jump in. I will be skipping all of the cutscenes and NPC dialogue in this run. I may do future runs where I talk more about the lore and more about the NPC interactions. I think that's best to leave for future videos. These messages on the ground, feel free to read those. They will give you some very basic tips to the game and explain the controls to you. The first thing that I would like to talk about is the equipment load. This for me is one of the key areas of the game that we need to understand right from the start. If I was to roll at this point, you would see that I perform what is known as a mid-roll. It is a medium speed roll. However, if I was to reduce my equipment load and roll again, I now perform a fast roll. This is a much better roll, as it allows me to dodge enemy attacks much easier than the medium roll. You can figure out the type of roll that you're going to have based on your equipment load. As you can see, my equipment load is currently 8 out of 52. That is under 25% of my maximum equipment load, which means I get to use a fast roll. If my equipment load was between 25 and 50% of my maximum equipment load, I would then get a medium roll. And if my equipment load was over 50%, I would get what we call a fat roll. A fat roll is the worst type of roll. It's incredibly slow, and it's very difficult to dodge enemy attacks. I would certainly advise for a first time player to avoid ever having an equipment load that means that you need to fat roll, and I would advise that you keep it under 25% to get the fast roll. You can, if you prefer to have a bulkier character that can take more damage, instead go with a medium roll, but certainly stay away from a fat roll if you can. The bonfires in this game are where you rest and restore all of your life. However, do bear in mind that if you rest at a bonfire, all the enemies in the area will also respawn. Through these doors is the first boss of the game, but we are currently not in a position to beat him. Our weapon is a broken sword that does very little damage, and if we try to fight him now, we'll be in for a very difficult time. Instead, we'll run through this door and escape and live to fight another day. Don't forget to rest at every bonfire that you come across, as this will give you a full heal. We'll pick up the shield, and I will pick up the item in the distance. This is our sword. I will equip both of those items, and I will dispatch with this foe. Okay. Now we have beaten him, we can talk something about the statistics on the weapons. This aspect of the weapon is the weapon's physical damage. This is how much damage the weapon will deal without any additional parameters taken into account. These are the parameters. This weapon has a C parameter bonus for strength and also a C parameter bonus for dexterity. What that means is that every point of strength or dexterity that we add, it will increase the weapon's damage by the same amount. If this were to be an A in strength, then the weapon's damage would gain more of a benefit from strength upgrades than it would from dexterity upgrades, and vice versa. These two components are the amount of damage increase that you would get from either intelligence or from faith. These are the required parameters of the weapon. As you can see over on the right hand side of the screen, I currently have 13 strength and 13 dexterity. This weapon requires you to have at least 10 strength and at least 10 dexterity, meaning that I am comfortably able to wield this weapon. If I did not have 10 strength or 10 dexterity, I would suffer a penalty to the weapon's damage, and it would make the weapon almost useless. The shields have similar components, but one major thing to bear in mind is the damage reduction percent. You're unlikely to be using your shield to deal damage, but you will be using it to block incoming damage from the enemies. A 100% physical block means that if an enemy attacks you with a physical attack, you will block 100% of that damage if you raise your shield. However, if they attack you with a magical attack, as the damage reduction is only 30%, you would only block 30% of the damage, meaning you will still take 70% of the damage. So bear that in mind when deciding whether to block or to dodge out of the way of an enemy attack. Weapons and items also have a durability, which is the amount of durability, obviously, of the item. Swords and shields will both take damage as you get hit or as you hit enemies, and you will need to constantly repair them to avoid them from breaking. But you can do that at a vendor or later on in the game at the bonfire, so it's not a massive problem. They also have a weight. The weight adds to your total equipment load. You need to make sure that if you get a new weapon or a new shield or new armor, and it's heavier than what you're currently wearing, that you don't go over that 25% or 50% barrier that we spoke about earlier. Right, let's make our way through the rest of the asylum. We want to stick to the left when we approach these stairs. You don't get hit by this boulder. And then we can speak to this bloke who will give us our first quest. He tells us that we need to go and ring a bell of awakening. He also gives you the Estus flask and a key. The Estus flasks are an item that you can use to heal your character. You start off with 5 of these, and you can then use those 5 times to heal if you take any damage. If you rest at a bonfire, you get all 5 of the Estus flasks back again, so feel free to use them liberally in order to avoid death. That's not the best way to deal with that enemy. That is. When it comes to dealing with enemies, there are 3 main ways to avoid damage. You can either roll to avoid the damage by rolling out of the way of the enemy's swing. You can lift your shield to block the damage. Or you can parry the attack. If you perform a parry, this will knock the enemy off guard, leaving them open to a nice riposte, which deals massive damage. It's definitely worth the time to get to know the different types of attacks that enemies have, and the ones that are parryable, it's worth learning how to parry them, as it will make the game much easier. Let's deal with this guy, as he will give us some extra souls. Again, if you can learn how to parry, it makes the encounters a lot easier. You'll have a much smoother game. When we go through the fog gate, we will be up once again against the first boss of the game, but this time we've got a much better set of weapons and shield, so we should be able to beat him. Make sure to heal to full health when you go through the door, and I would also advise switching to the two-handed stance in order to be able to deal more damage to the boss. We will start this encounter by walking off the edge and pressing the right bumper button to deal a drop attack. This will deal massive damage to the boss and make the fight much easier right from the start. I would advise trying to stay behind this boss as much as possible. Almost all of his attacks deal damage to the front. He has a few different types of damaging attack. I will try to explain how best to avoid these. If you do find yourself in front of him, these attacks can easily be rolled through. He also has an overhead smash attack that I'm hoping he will demonstrate. Again, very easy to dodge out of the way. The best advice, stay behind him. There's not much you can do if you're right behind him. He should be a nice easy kill. Now, one main aspect of this game is not to get disheartened. The first time that I played the game, I think I died to every boss. I died to that boss a few times, found it very challenging. But with time, the game does get easier. You just need to have perseverance and the dedication to stick at it, keep practicing, and eventually you will get better. We are now at Firelink Shrine. Firelink Shrine is the hub world of the game. It's one of the central areas. You'll come back here quite a lot throughout the run. Whilst I'm here, let me explain some of the leveling system to you. As you can see, we currently have 11 vitality. I also have 2,288 souls. This is my souls count in the bottom right of the screen. And I need 724 souls in order to be able to level up. Now, as I level up my character, as you can see, the amount of required souls increases. At the start of the game, it's easy to level up. As you progress through the game, you need more and more souls for each level. So it's certainly worth spending your starting points wisely. You don't want to start wasting souls on stats that you don't need, as then later on you may be lacking stats in other areas. Vitality is the total amount of health that your character has. I would strongly recommend putting a lot of points into Vitality earlier on. This means you can take more damage, and there's less risk of you dying. Attunement is the amount of magical slots that you have to be able to cast your spells, your sorceries, or your miracles. Not something I'll be touching in this run, and I'll be leaving my attunement to 8 for the duration of this. Endurance is the amount of stamina that you have. Every action that you take, whether it be running, jumping, blocking, or attacking, consumes some of that stamina. And if you're consuming stamina, if you run out of stamina and you take a hit, then you may get staggered or knocked down. So ideally, you're going to want to keep a nice healthy stamina balance at all times, and the more stamina you've got, the easier that is to do. Strength and dexterity will both increase the amount of damage that you deal with certain weapons. However, bear in mind that it's only weapons that have a parameter bonus requiring strength or dexterity. If you have a weapon that's got an A in strength for an A parameter bonus in strength, then feel free to put loads of points in strength. You'll get a massive damage output. And likewise with a weapon that's very focused on dexterity, such as a katana. Resistance is a bit of a joke stat. People tend not to put any points in that at all. Just leave that as whatever value you have. Don't waste any points in there. Intelligence and faith work similar to strength and dexterity, in that they will increase the amount of damage that you deal with either miracles or with sorcery. Not something I'll be touching in this run. I'm going to stay to a purely melee focused build. However, if you want to play around with that, then feel free to do so. And I think that is it. Don't forget that certain weapons and certain spells will require you to have a certain amount of strength, dexterity, intelligence and faith. If you find a new weapon that you'd like to use, just make sure that you've got the stats to use it first of all. And if not, do a bit of grinding, get some souls, and then upgrade that stat so that you can use it. I will stick with putting points in vitality for now, just to get that little boost of health right from the start of the game. And I think that's it for the first video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope if you're a new player that you found this helpful. I will be in the next video showing you how to get some useful items right at the start of the game, and then progressing through the Undead Burg and hopefully beating the Capra Demon. If you're an experienced player and you would like to improve on anything that I've said in this video, then please feel free to leave a comment in the comments box below. And likewise, if you're a new player and you would like some tips on how to beat certain areas or how to overcome certain challenges, again, leave a note in the comments below and I will hopefully get back to you with some tips. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed the rest of the series. Bye.